Hey friends, today I'm in Malta, exploring its fascinating mysteries. There's a lot more to the story of Malta than most realize, and today we're going to be talking about it. So you may know that Malta claimed the oldest megalithic temples in the world, at least before the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and Gunung Padang in Indonesia, which is about 20,000 years old. The temples of Malta supposedly predate the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, and the Moai of Easter Island. I say supposedly because the stones themselves from these sites have never been dated, only organic remains from the context of these sites. The problem with this, of course, being that the organic remains in archaeological context could have been deposited after the site's construction. So it is nearly impossible to know with 100% certainty the true age of these monuments and sites, especially considering many of them were built atop even older monuments and sites. So yes, there is a lot of mystery there, and I'm sure at least some of the ancient sites and monuments from around the world have very likely been misdated. What we do know for sure is that Malta is home to some very ancient temples, which are thought to have been constructed between 3600 BC and 2500 BC. And the official story is that there were no humans in Malta before about 6000 BC. The temples exhibit incredible megalithic architecture, freestanding, dry stacked, without mortar, and precise. They exhibit complex astronomical alignments, such as that on the solstice and equinoxes. Various effects illuminate blocks and create glyphs on the temple walls. And you can see them from this model on display at the site of Munedra. And then if we go over here, we can see the summer solstice alignment for the temple of Hazar-Im. And not only does this entire altar illuminate in the foreground, but there's a little hole cut into the temple wall, and it illuminates this shape on one of the stones inside of this apse. At the 12,000-year-old site of Karahan Tepe in Turkey, we see a similar technology employed where a hole carved into a temple wall illuminates the face you see protruding from the temple wall on the right, and this happens on the solstice or the equinox. The first mystery of Malta is who built these temples. The builders themselves left no record except for the stones, and by the time Bronze Age people showed up on the island, the temple builders had all but disappeared. But right from the very beginning, the temple builders were cutting and carving and transporting impossibly heavy stones and displaying an incredibly sophisticated understanding of astronomy, engineering, and mathematics, just to name a few. How long did these skills take to develop? Where did they develop? Were they developed here in Malta, or were they imported? Where are the antecedents of this temple building culture? One thing we do know about the Maltese temple builders is that they worshipped the mother goddess, also known as Venus, as statuettes and sculptures of the mother goddess have been found throughout virtually all the Maltese temples. And here's where it gets interesting, because the Venus cult is incredibly ancient and a distinctively Paleolithic cult. Let's do a quick rundown on some of the ancient Venuses that have been found. We have the Venus of Willendorf, found in Austria, dating to about 25 to 30,000 years BP. Then there's the Venus of Hohlfels, dating to around 40,000 to 35,000 years before present. The Venus of Dolní Věstonice, found in the Czech Republic, dating to 29,000 to 25,000 years before present. The Venus of Lesbos, found in France, dating to 26,000 to 24,000 years BP. And the Venus of Moravani, dating to 22,000 years BC. Some Venuses are actually even more ancient than that, like the Venus of Tantan, dating to 500,000 to 300,000 years BP, and the Venus of Barakat Ram, which dates to 280 to 250,000 years before present. And then you have the Venuses of Malta, which are thought to date to about 3300 BC. If the dating is to be believed. And these are archaeological contexts they've been found in, but it's possible that they were heirlooms or hand-me-downs or much older relics that found their final resting place within an archaeological context that was much younger than the figurines themselves. And even if the dating of these artifacts is correct, they're connected to an incredibly ancient lineage that spans tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Could this provide some clues as to the development and evolution of Malta's temple building culture and its associated sciences and abilities like astronomy, mathematics, and engineering? Take the Sleeping Lady of Malta, for example. She was painted in red ochre. just like the Venus of Willendorf was 25,000 years ago. Painting Venus figurines in red ochre was a common practice throughout the Paleolithic, and this incredibly ancient tradition finds its way to Malta's temple building culture. The cult and worship of the mother goddess is incredibly ancient and found throughout all of ancient Europe and the ancient Near East. It is one of the earliest art forms of humanity and possibly one of the earliest objects and deities of worship by ancient humans. And yes, we do find Venus figurines in Turkey as well. This is the seated woman of Catalhoyuk, and this figurine dates to about 6000 BC. But we can't talk about Malta without talking about the cart ruts, like seen at Clapham Junction. Now, these cart ruts actually snake their way all over the island of Malta, and you can see them in some places more than others, of course, but Clapham Junction is the most famous. It's named after the train station because the cart ruts appear almost as train tracks, just snaking across. Sometimes they seem to switch and go off in different directions or join with other tracks, and nobody knows how old the cart ruts are. There's been a lot of theories as to when they were carved or how they were carved. Nobody even knows what purpose they were served. Some people have theorized that they were used to transport rainwater, but this doesn't really account for the fact that they always appear in sets of two, which I feel suggests more of a transportation function or some sort of wheeled vehicle. Here at Clapham Junction, you can see that most of these tracks lead directly to a gigantic modern-day quarry, and one has to imagine at least some elements of the archaeological record have been destroyed here. Malta is not the only place where cart ruts appear. You also find cart ruts pretty much throughout the entire ancient world. And this fact isn't very well known, but in my recent travels, I observed and documented cart ruts in Sardinia. I've observed and documented cart ruts in Minorca, and I know that there are also cart ruts in Turkey. There's cart ruts in South America. There are cart ruts in India. So there's cart ruts all over the ancient world, and no one knows who carved them or when they were carved or what purpose they served. Back in Malta, some of the cart ruts are even found underwater or submerged by the ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, which suggests that these cart ruts could have been carved when the sea level was lower during the last ice age. Now let's pop back over to Sardinia for a second at the necropolis of Su Crucifixu Manu. And here, this is sort of like the Sardinian Clapham Junction. It's a fascinating site. You can see cart ruts snaking all over the area. But this site is interesting because it contains 22 Domu de Jana, which are the rock-cut tombs. And these were all made between the Neolithic period, 4th millennium BC, and the 3rd millennium BC. So there's some of the oldest archaeological features on Sardinia, and you can see that the cart ruts clearly must have predated them because the rock-cut tombs are cut right through the cart ruts. So the cart ruts seemingly most likely came first, and then these incredibly ancient tombs were cut through them. So everywhere you look at these cart ruts, you see evidence that they sort of predated everything else around them. Just as a little aside here, at the necropolis of Su Crucifixu Manu, you see these spectacular relief carvings of the bull, and they almost look identical to the Sabian symbol of the crescent moon that we find at Sagmatar. At the Urfa Museum, you can see examples of toy cars, for lack of a better term. These are from about 3000 BC, and I would not be surprised at all if full-size models of these cars existed. And honestly, I would not be surprised at all if these cars had something to do with the cart ruts, if this was some ancient technology and they either created the ruts or they ran in the ruts. Maybe they were pulled by a bull. I'm not sure, but something in me feels like there's a connection between these and the cart ruts, but that's just my theory. It's wild speculation. At many of the temples in Malta, you find these stone spheres, and it's theorized that these spheres may have played a role in the transportation of the megaliths. Naturally, I also found myself wondering if the cart ruts could have contained the spheres and have been used for transporting these huge blocks. Here at the Tarshian Temple back in Malta, we also find some pretty spectacular relief carvings of bulls as well. So it's clear that bull worship was pretty widespread throughout the ancient world, and it's fascinating to see all the different ways it pops up. The age of Taurus was 4300 BC to 2150 BC, so finding bull relief carvings in tombs and on temples dating to that time is what you'd expect to find from a star-worshipping group of temple builders and tomb builders. These relief carvings are really easy to miss, but if you know what you're looking for, you can spot them. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed my video on Malta. I know we went on a few tangents there, but that's the way it is with the ancient world. It's so much more connected than people realize.